Before Arnold Schwarzenegger and Lou Ferrigno conquered Hollywood fresh off bodybuilding retirement, and long before Frank Zane and Bob Paris redefined the meaning of an aesthetic body, one man did both. When asked about their bodybuilding inspiration, perhaps no other name is cited by Golden Era legends more than Steve Reeves. Dubbed as the body that launched 1,000 careers, the 6'1", 220-pounder achieved a look that is still considered the absolute archetype of the classic male physique to this very day, embodying what artists and mathematicians call the golden ratio. His broad shoulders flared outward dramatically, tapering to a wasp-thin waist, giving him a striking look reminiscent of Greek statues. And he did it all before steroids invaded the sport. He clinched the most prestigious titles in all of bodybuilding and retired at the very peak of his career at only 24, before going on to conquer the silver screen with his smash hit Hercules, which launched an entire genre, becoming the highest paid actor in Europe in the process. In fact, he was so highly paid that he refused to play James Bond because the studio couldn't afford him. From a small kid raised by a single mother, a war hero, a bodybuilding legend, and a Hollywood superstar, to turning his back on fame at the height of his popularity to lead a quiet life as a rancher. This is the story of the greatest bodybuilder of all time. Born in the bone-deep quiet railroad town of Glasgow, Montana in the winter of 1926, Steve was the only child of Goldie Malone and Lester Reeves. Lester died in a farming accident when Steve was just a toddler, leaving him and his mother to make a new start and move to Oakland, California.
Yeah, my father got killed when I was 20 months old. So I don't really know my father. I just see pictures of him and hear a lot of stories about him. I remember seeing a picture when he was 12 years old, chopping down a tree in Minnesota. He had shoulders about this wide. He was my height and my weight and my build that I am today without ever working out.
Winner of the Healthiest Baby in the County Award, 6-month-old Steve seemed destined for a life of stardom in the world of health and fitness. His early promise grew into passion by the time he reached high school, where he discovered the emerging world of bodybuilding. Steve recalled in an interview with the Los Angeles Times, "When I started in high school, there was this guy, Joe Gambino, who was about 5'5". I was already 6 foot, but Gambino could beat me at arm wrestling, and I just couldn't figure out how. One day, I went to his house and asked his sister, 'Where's Joe?' And she said, 'Oh, he's out in the garage working out with weights.' So I went out to the garage, and he taught me how to lift weights. He used to charge me 50 cents a lesson. Joe became a barber. I became Mr. Universe."
When I first started training, I used to look at pictures of different bodybuilders, and there was no one bodybuilder that I thought, well, I want to be like him. I would look at John Grimming, and I'd say, I'd like to have legs like that. Alan Stephan, I say, now there is a great pair of lats. And maybe a definition like Clarence Ross. So I was just making a composite of these different bodybuilders.
Inspired by magazine pictures of the likes of John Grimmick, Steve began working out in his home garage, using a barbell set and tracking his workouts on the garage wall with crayons. Soon enough, he joined a bodybuilding gym and came to the attention of gym owner Ed Yarrick, who recognized his potential and took him under his wing. Steve was the perfect genetic clay that Yarrick would mold into a chiseled masterpiece in no time.
My training was very intense, 2.5 hours, 3 days a week, but I mean really intense. It's almost hypnotic. When I started at 16 and a half years old, I was 6 foot tall and weighed 163 and worked out for a month and just hardened up for that month. Then the following month, I put on 10 pounds to 173. The following month, another 10 pounds to 183, all solid muscle. The next month, 193. So in actually 3 months, I gained 30 pounds of solid muscle, and the waist hadn't gone up a centimeter.
I was the best looking guy at the gym. And the guys would work out 3 or 4 years. They couldn't believe it.
But it took me a whole year to get from 193 to 23. I didn't have any limitations. I didn't know it was difficult to gain that much muscle in that short time. Nobody told me it was difficult, so it wasn't, you see.
Unfortunately, this rapid progress would be cut short.
The fateful hour of 11 has struck, and Britain's final warning to Hitler having been ignored, a state of war once more exists between Great Britain and Germany.
World War II put a temporary halt to Steve's athletic ambitions when he was inducted into the Army right after graduating high school. He was shipped to the Philippines and fought the long and deadly battle up Balete Pass before contracting malaria, complicated by a serious case of jungle fever, costing him over 20 pounds of mostly muscle mass. Shortly after, he was assigned to Japan and stationed in Hokkaido Island during the Allied occupation.
Could have been devastating if I had the wrong mentality. But when I went in there as if I was watching a motion picture. I would see people being killed. I would see people being carried out on stretchers. I mean, that could have been devastating for a guy just turned 19, going into the front line.
When I was in the Army, from the age of 18 to just a little under 21, I wrote a little book for myself, How to Win Mr. America, and I outlined all the exercises I would use and what lifestyle I would live, all that.
Determined to get back in shape, and with the help of a Japanese interpreter, he tracked down a local foundry where he had a custom 210 barbell set manufactured. He built an exercise bench and was able to pass it through Army inspections by claiming it was an ironing board. It didn't take him long before he got back in such good condition once again. So good that his fellow soldiers started referring to him as the Shape. With the end of the war and after 26 months of service, Steve finally arrived back home and was ready to take the bodybuilding world by storm. After his return to American lands, Steve went at once to Yarg's gym and trained with him again. But this time, he was no longer Yarg's protege. He worked up to 215 pounds and decided to make his competitive debut at the 1946 AAU Mr. Pacific Coast contest held in Portland. He captured attention with his unique combination of proportions, shape, size, and symmetry, and he easily won the tall class and the overall title, lifting him from local gym life into the competitive spotlight. Not realizing that he was eligible for the Mr. California contest until too late, Steve did not enter. Instead, he returned to the 1947 Mr. Pacific, this time sweeping best chest, best arms, and best legs, and securing his second win, followed by a third win at the AAU Mr. Western America, a prelude to his national success. Fueled by his success, and with the persuasion of his friends, Steve eyed the most coveted title in bodybuilding, the 1947 AAU Mr. America. Launched in 1939 by the Amateur Athletic Union, the Mr. America aimed to find the most muscular representation of American masculinity. Unlike modern bodybuilding shows, there was also a strong emphasis on the contestant's sportsmanship, poise, and even personal character. The 21-year-old made a trip to Chicago to pose next to over 40 of the best bodybuilders in the country, the largest field yet to compete in a physique contest, vying to be crowned as the 9th AAU Mr. America. He was still relatively unknown nationally, but he was nothing if not feared by the rest of the challengers. Future AAU Mr. California, Mr. America, and IFBB Mr. Universe George Eiferman said, "No one in the Midwest has seen him. A few days before the contest, we heard rumors about a man who had throngs of people following him along the Lake Michigan beachfront, and we could not imagine who could draw crowds by merely walking along a beach. I was anxious to see this man, and when we did see him, we knew he was Mr. America for that year."
A lot of my competitors, the people in the same contest, they had been bodybuilding for years and had their pictures in every magazine they could for years and years. And I didn't. I didn't want to have a picture taken of me until I was where I thought I should be. Right. So nobody had ever seen my pictures in the magazines when the contest was on. So I'd walk down the beach and they'd say, "Who are you?" I said, "Mr. X."
George was so enamored by Steve's physique that he asked him whether he had intestines, since there seemed to be no room for them. It took the 10 judges about 2 hours to decide who deserved the Mr. America crown. Eventually, it came down to Steve and Mr. California, Eric Peterson, whom Steve had defeated earlier in the Mr. Pacific Coast contest. With each of them tied at 72 points, a pose-off was held to decide the winner. Shining with bronze skin, peak conditioning, and with a graceful posing routine, Steve was able to nose out Peterson once again. Feeling dejected, Peterson, who won the most muscular subdivision, didn't even congratulate the new Mr. America as he'd received the medal. Not that it mattered much to Steve, who just cemented his fame as the face of American bodybuilding. "I'm the luckiest guy in the world," he said. "Some fellows want to be president, but I've always wanted to be Mr. America. That's what I'm most fitted to be." Overnight, Steve was thrust into the forefront of the bodybuilding world and was in high demand by the top physique photographers in the industry who couldn't believe their eyes, with physique photographer Lou Hannigan stating, "I am sure if one of these ancient Greeks came to life today and saw our new Mr. America, he would find it hard to believe that Steve was not a reincarnation of the body of one of those superior beings from Mount Olympus." And a writer in Your Physique magazine, the precursor of Flex, raved, "I personally proclaim him to be the finest specimen of American manhood I have ever seen in a kid for his years." According to a change of rules in 1942, winners of the Mr. America title weren't allowed to enter the competition a second time, and so Steve's focus shifted away from bodybuilding into a completely different endeavor. Unlike today, back in the 1940s, not even winners of contests of the caliber of Mr. America could secure endorsement contracts, making it impossible to earn a living from bodybuilding.
Well, it is a new innovation, making money out of bodybuilding. I remember when I came to the Mr. Universe both times, I had to pay my own way and stay at my hotel and food and all those things. Now they pay those guys money in advance just to show.
In fact, it was hard to make a living as a bodybuilder. That's why I went into being an actor.
Trying to realize his acting dreams, he entered the Theodore Irving School, where he performed on weekends with another comedian working theaters and small clubs around Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. Around that time, Steve had gained a new fan. Hollywood mogul and future Academy Award winner Cecil B. DeMille was such a big fan that he commissioned a special poster of Steve for his office at Universal Studios and approached him to star in his new biblical epic, Samson and Delilah. The role was his under one condition. In order not to dwarf the rest of the cast, he had to lose about 10 pounds of mass.
So I lost about 10 pounds. I didn't get the contract for good because they wanted to use Victor Mature because he had been in the films for a longer time. And I hadn't lost enough weight. He wanted me to lose 20 pounds. I lost about 12 and he wanted me to lose 20. So he said, "You're not cooperating. We'll have to cancel your contract."
As much as it brought him fame and admiration in the world of bodybuilding, Steve's physique was the biggest barrier between him and his Hollywood dreams.
Gregory Peck would not have me work with him in a film because he didn't want to be standing beside me. Gary Cooper, who didn't want me to be in a picture with him. Those are just two that I know of. And there was Burt Lancaster, who didn't want me to be in a picture with him.
Deciding to go back and do what he does best, Steve was set to expand his bodybuilding domination, but not before a few setbacks. Held on the 13th of March, 1948, the inaugural Mr. USA contest witnessed Steve's first defeat. Steve exhibited his usual classic Greek ideal, while Clancy Ross, who'd never suffered a loss up to that point, brought pure proportioned muscle. Eventually, his definition and symmetry were judged superior. Gracious even in loss, Steve declared Ross as a great champion. Undeterred, he set his sights on the greatest prize in bodybuilding at what many thought was the first controversial contest of his career. Before the IFBB, there was the National Amateur Bodybuilders Association, better known as NABA. And before the Mr. Olympia, there was the Mr. Universe. Beginning in 1948, the Mr. Universe quickly became the most prestigious and the go-to international stage in the world during the 50s and 60s. Nothing mattered more than becoming the man crowned as Mr. Universe, and the 23-year-old phenom wanted to be that man. Organized by the Health and Strength League, the precursor to NABA, this year's Mr. Universe was held in London on the 13th of August to coincide with the Olympic Games as an open contest, with amateurs and professionals competing on level terms. Classes were to be decided on height divisions with 4 classes. Class 1 of 6 feet and over saw Steve beat Rube Martin and future NABA president Oscar Heidenstam. Eventually, the young fan was pitted against his 39-year-old idol and the only 2-time Mr. America, John Grimmick, who also won his class. The judges called it a draw, before Bob Hoffman suggested a way to break the tie. Hoffman was the founder of the esteemed York Barbell Club. He and Grimek went way back to 1938 when Hoffman invited him to train at his club. He also entered weightlifting contests under Hoffman's tutelage and was featured on multiple covers of Hoffman's Strength and Health magazine. In what was widely deemed a conflict of interest, Hoffman's suggestion was to have a gymnastics competition between the two finalists, with the title being awarded to the better gymnast. I knew right then I had lost the title, Steve said. Being a great gymnast himself, something that Hoffman was plainly aware of, Grimek pressed into the handstand, then walked over and went into a full split, hitting a double bicep pose, and was awarded the title.
Grimek was the legend. Steve Reeves was the new boy, the up-and-coming champion. I would say that the judges were probably more of the vintage and of the appreciation of the John Grimek style of physique. It's a bit like the new young guy. If he's going to beat the old champion, he's got to be about 10% better.
Humbled and gracious, Steve said over the microphone, John Grimek is the greatest bodybuilder who ever lived.
I went over there and hoping that I would win, but didn't think I would because I hadn't trained for a while. So I went over there under what I wanted to be. So coming second to great John Grimek was a bonus, a plus for me, because he was one of the few people that we boys of that age admired.
Future NABA president Oscar Heidenstam, who had placed third in the Universe Tall class, suggested that Steve come with him to France to compete in the 1948 Mr. World competition, held only 3 days after the Mr. Universe. Still adamant about expanding his dominance internationally, Steve traveled to Cannes to compete in the contest. There, he blew the French judges' minds, who had never seen a body of that caliber before. In the end, Oscar came in fifth, while Steve walked away with the title, reinforcing his global appeal and restoring his motivation after 2 consecutive defeats. After coming back home, Steve's focus returned to acting. With bodybuilding taking the back seat, his shape slightly dipped, and he was relegated to third place in the 1949 Mr. USA, with Clancy Ross in second place, and John Grimek taking the title before retiring from bodybuilding undefeated. After taking a 1-year layoff from bodybuilding, Steve set his sights at the one contest that had eluded him. Now eclipsing Mr. America in terms of prestige, the NABA Mr. Universe was now the premier global bodybuilding title. But by the time he'd made up his mind to enter the contest, it was only 4 weeks away. In an interview in Dynamic Muscle Building book, he said, "About 1 month before it was to take place, I had already won the Mr. America and Mr. World events, the top 2 amateur crowns. To make my career complete, I decided to try for the Mr. Universe title, which is the biggest professional crown. I made up my mind overnight, and then the next day I took my first workout on the comeback trail." At 198 pounds, he headed to York Barbell Club, the home of John Grimek, where his preparations took place with the help of his good friend, George Eiferman. With everyone noticing how much Steve's physique had declined, whispers of disbelief began to spread around the club. John Grimek wrote in the November 1964 issue of Muscular Development, "A number of visitors who used to drop in at the old gym and watch us train remarked their disappointment in Reeves' physique. This Reeves looked like he had lost everything except his legs, but his arms, shoulders, chest, and back lacked any semblance of previous muscularity. The accepted opinion of the fellows in the gym was that he didn't have a chance of even placing in the Mr. Universe contest, let alone winning it. It was a monumental task, but Steve would put everything he had to get into Mr. Universe-worthy shape. It was during the 2nd and 3rd weeks that I packed on all my body weight, a solid 19 pounds, he said. And that's when everyone's doubts dissolved." Grimek wrote, "By the end of the 6th week, the Hercules of muscledom had recovered his large, swiny arms and a fuller, rounder chest. His back looked wider and more massive. Even his shoulders looked thicker, and his abdomen showed more detail and muscularity. There was no more whispering in the gym about whether he could win the title. Everybody agreed that it would take a darn good man to beat him now, if he could be beaten. By the end of his prep, and according to some sources, Steve had added 35 pounds to his frame. Such transformation aroused many people's suspicions, and throughout the years, some theorized that Steve wasn't actually natural, as he always claimed. When asked about it in 1981, he answered, "The fact is, none of us ever knew steroids existed back then. Yes, steroids were around, but bodybuilders and weightlifters were not aware of them. I know some people will assume that it is impossible to gain that much muscle in such a short time. What these people do not understand is the miracle of muscle memory, and that I'm an easy gainer. I was there before, so I was regaining lost muscle."
Would you have ever taken steroids, even if you were
No,
available?
never, because it's not health-oriented. I mean, I plan to live to be 100. I don't know if I'll make it, but I'm going to try. And that there would get me dead at 65 probably.
Still, not everyone was convinced, especially considering that his transformation occurred at the one place that gave birth to PED use in America.
So the only true source on an accusation, I guess, of Steve Reeves using anabolic steroids comes from the book by Wendy Lay. Kurt Marnell, the mentor of Arnold Schwarzenegger, tells in a paragraph that he actually learned about steroids and their dosages from Steve Reeves. He further accuses Reeves of having met him in France during a 1952 vacation. From the information he gained from Reeves in 1952, Marnell was then able to give Arnold the injections of primobolan and also dianabol in oral tablet forms. The first one is primobolan. Now, if you look at the date that it was actually synthesized and introduced for medical use, that was in 1962. Dianabol was actually created by Seba, and it was developed in 1955, 3 years after the supposed vacation that Steve Reeves took to France and where he met Kurt Marnell.
Now, this statement is taken directly from Building the Classic Physique. That statement has also been brought to my attention by a friend who surfs the internet. No, it is not true. I never heard of steroids until the mid-1960s, and I was never in France during the 1950s. My first trip to France was in 1948 when I entered and won the Mr. World contest in Cannes. My second trip to France was not until 1960 when I attended the premiere of my movie The Last Days of Pompeii.
These guys did not take steroids. I know this for a fact. You're out of your mind that Steve Reeves took a bunch of this stuff. No, they did not. These guys were just, if you want to call them genetically gifted.
Yeah.
I mean, Steve Reeves would not do any exercise if he thought it would make his waist wider. He would avoid it. These guys were very dedicated and they just had good genetics, that's all.
Whatever the case may be, he was as ready as he'll ever be for the most important contest of his career.
If you're not Mr. Universe, it'll just break Grandpa's heart. And I know you'll win, because you're the greatest and the best.
Steve traveled to London and was the only American among 50 contestants. His main competitor was England's rising star and Mr. Britain, 21-year-old Reg Park, who'd become an inspiration to many people in the upcoming years, including a kid by the name of Arnold Schwarzenegger. In the tall class, 4 men advanced to the final showdown, but 2 emerged clearly above the rest. From the very first moment, the panel recognized that the top 2 places would come down to these 2. Their posing routines were described as breathtaking, drawing deafening applause from a wildly enthusiastic audience. Steve projected an aura of classical proportion and heroic muscle shape. The judges admired his lines and striking stage presence, which was described as matchless by the judges. With his imposing size, tremendous muscle mass, and symmetry, the towering Briton was considered by some to have been the better man that day, as his thicker, more powerful look stood out. The judges struggled to separate the pair, as 2 voted for Reeves, 1 for Park, and 2 were so undecided they marked them jointly. The final deciding judge cast his vote for Reeves, sparing the head judge from making a casting vote and sealing Steve's victory.
Well, Reg Park in 1950, I had seen pictures of Reg. I knew he would be a formidable competitor. I didn't know about that one either because I only had 1 month to train before that one. One strange thing, some Englishman donated the trophy for Mr. Universe. It was a statue of Eugene Sandow that Sandow had actually had on his own desk. So he wanted to make sure it went to an Englishman. So he thought, well, Red Park was going to win that year. He thought he was safe. He knew I was trying to be in the movies and hadn't trained for a year or two. I was lucky enough to win that one.
This marked one of the few contests Reg Park lost at his peak. And while his bodybuilding career still held future victories for him, Steve's career was over. But a much more successful one was just around the corner. After reaching the pinnacle of bodybuilding competitively and aesthetically, and with no real money in the sport, Steve's ambition grew bigger. He quit bodybuilding at the very peak of his career, at the young age of 24, solely to pursue acting. After a couple of years of theatrical performances and a few TV bouts, he secured a supporting role in the 1954 detective B-movie, Jailbait. A few weeks later, he took part in the musical comedy Athena, a satire of the post-war health craze that put Steve's physique front and center.
And I was hoping it would be more successful than it was. I was hoping it would be another 7 Guys to 7 Brothers. I was pleased to do it, and I didn't have as much dialogue as I would have liked.
In the same year, a more significant event took place. He was married to 18-year-old actress Sandra Smith. Unfortunately, their marriage didn't last long, as Sandra wanted a settled home life, while Steve was laser-focused on making it in Hollywood. Well, American producers never figured out what to do with someone so distractingly handsome and, by pre-steroid standards, colossal. Europeans knew just how to capitalize well on that. After watching Athena, the daughter of Italian director Pietro Franchisi begged him to cast Steve for the leading role in his upcoming film, Hercules. Pietro cabled a round-trip airline ticket and $10,000 to Steve, who had just decided to quit the movie business for a steady job with a health club chain. In 1957, the 31-year-old traveled to Rome to star in what he thought would be just some Italian kid's movie, made the film, and returned to his job in the health clubs. But little did he know that this would be his ticket into Hollywood superstardom.
I want to become like you, Hercules.
And I'm sure you'll succeed if you have a strong will.
After its release in 1958, Hercules caught on like wildfire. Fans throughout Europe flocked to theaters to witness the newest motion picture sensation. When producer Joseph E. Levine decided to release the film in the United States with a soundtrack dubbed in English, it found an even wider audience. It became one of the surprise smash hits of 1959, igniting a global trend of sword and sandal movies, with Reg Park, Lou Ferrigno, and Mark Forrest trying to replicate Steve's success in their own portrayals of Hercules later on.
I must say, Hercules, I was fated to do Hercules.
He said that he only trained when those movies were made 1 month out of the year. 1 month.
I didn't have any idea that Hercules, my first starring role, would be the most successful picture in the whole world, not over the United States, but the whole world.
Levine paid only $110,000 for it, then spent 10 times that promoting it. It was an unprecedented campaign, which became the Hollywood model from then on. He opened the movie across the country in an unheard of 627 theaters at once, and Levine was on his way to riches and fame. But he got into a fight with Steve Reeves over the size of his credit. Not Reeves' credit, Levine's.
He said, I want to have my billing much bigger than yours on the picture there. I want to have mine bigger than anybody's. I said, well, Joe, in my contract it said that I will get 75% of the billing for the height of my picture, my name, in fact. And no other character will get more than 50%, including producers and directors. And after all, you're not even producing or directing, you're just distributing it. So you threw the stuff on the ceiling and spaghetti and everything was dripping from the ceiling and it was a mess. Just because he couldn't get his name bigger than mine.
Despite the overwhelming success, critics weren't kind to Steve's acting performance.
How did you feel when people said, Steve Reeves, he's just gorgeous, but he can't really act?
It really didn't bother me because it wasn't something I really dedicated my life to. In fact, it would be difficult to dedicate your life to because it's so intangible. I mean, it's not like working out with weights or training for a marathon or something like that, where you have a certain pattern, a certain way to do it. I mean, I don't think there's any one way, any one great method of learning to act.
Did you see yourself as a good actor?
No, I never did.
On the other hand, though, the general population's perception was different. Before Hercules, bodybuilding was seen as a niche or even freakish subculture, but Steve's appearance made muscular physiques more socially acceptable. Many audience members had never seen a body like that outside of comic books or sculptures, and his classical symmetry resonated with the public, creating a new standard of masculinity: aesthetic, symmetrical, healthy, and still heroic. His image even influenced many of the future Golden Era greats, who frequently cited the Reeves physique as their inspiration to start working out.
I still think that Steve Reeves was the greatest of all time.
Steve Reeves, from early on, he was my idol. But the first time Steve Reeves made the movie Hercules, I couldn't get over this. Man, that's the ideal body.
The very first thing that really caught my attention was seeing Steve Reeves.
Steve Reeves, he was sort of like my childhood heroes growing up.
Steve Reeves was very inspiring to me with this role. Steve Reeves, when he was breaking the chains, that was always very impressive to me. Steve Reeves is the man.
Were my idols growing up. This guy, here, over here, Steve Reeves. Steve Reeves was in even have this up. Once I saw that movie, Hercules Unchained, and he went like, and pulled down the pillars with a couple of chains. I said, that's it. That's where I want to go. That movie set a new course for my life.
After the success of Hercules, it was followed by a sequel in 1959 that also included former heavyweight boxing champion Primo Carnera. From 1954 to 1969, Steve appeared in 18 movies, most of which were sword and sandal epics shot on relatively small budgets. But even more iconic were some of the roles that he refused to play. When the directors of the first James Bond movie, Dr. No, were looking for the titular character, Steve Reeves was one of the top names on the list and was offered $100,000 to play the lead. Already the highest paid actor in Europe, earning $250,000 to play Hercules, he turned it down.
He was offered a part in a James Bond picture recently, but he didn't like the billing and he didn't like the money, so he passed.
Leaving the vacant role to be occupied by a former bodybuilder and the 1953 amateur Mr. Universe participant, Sean Connery.
Bond. James Bond.
Who played the role for just $17,000. Another opportunity he passed on was A Fistful of Dollars, the film that launched Clint Eastwood's career.
Get 3 coffins ready.
I'm a man of the West. I was born in Montana. All my uncles are cowboys. They have big ranches and things like that. So I'm a Western cowboy type of person, and so I wanted to represent that the way it should be. So I thought, how can an Italian director do a picture like that based on a Japanese film? That was based on that samurai picture of the Japanese director, Kurosawa, I think, like that. Right. So I thought, how could that be? So I turned it down, right? I wouldn't have been the character who go on smoking a cigar, because I don't believe in advertising unhealthy things like that. Right. So I wouldn't have done it that way anyway.
Back during filming The Last Days of Pompeii, Steve had dislocated his shoulder when his chariot slammed into a tree, but he still completed the remainder of his scenes and performed his own stunts, further aggravating the injury, which grew steadily worse through the 1960s, eventually forcing him to retire from acting at the peak of his career. After marrying his girlfriend, who'd also been his manager for the past few years, he finally settled into married life before catching the acting bug one last time. Having always wanted to make a Western, he starred in his last ever film, A Long Ride from Hell, before retiring for good in 1968 at the age of 42.
Why did you retire so early?
Well, when I was 32, I believe, Earl Flynn and Tyrone Power, both of them died before they reached the age of 50. So I thought, well, this is a lot of stress, and I'm not really suited for it. It's not really what I really like to do.
Steve spent the early years of anonymity and solitude with his wife, Aileen, alternating between their residences in Switzerland and California. Little was ever published about him, and he gave few interviews.
Whatever became of Steve Reeves, Hercules?
He lives on a beautiful ranch near San Diego, grows all of his own food.
After declining his offer to make an appearance in his newly formed bodybuilding federation, WBBG, Steve finally accepted Dan's invitation to attend the 1973 WBBG as the event's special guest. He appeared on stage in a suit, giving a short speech and accepting a ceremonial key to the city, as well as a Hall of Fame-style honor from Dan Lurie. After graciously accepting the award, and when the loud applause of a full house of 5,000 people finally subsided, Steve said, "I'm sure I don't deserve it, but I want to thank all the fans who have supported me over the years. If I have been an inspiration for many of you in these past years in any way, then I am happy to have been. I am deeply grateful that you have seen fit to honor me, and I am extremely pleased. Thank you."
I was right under the stage. But the thing I still remember about that show was how uncomfortable he looked. He looked like he wanted to get out of there fast. Steve Reeves was kind of very introverted. He felt uncomfortable around people. He was very shy.
This was corroborated by Arnold, who described Steve as shy, stating, "He was an introvert, not an outgoing guy. His way of expression was through developing the physique. That was the way he could communicate." In fact, Steve told the Los Angeles Times, "I never enjoyed being an actor. What I enjoyed was the challenge. I always came to work on time, I always knew my lines, but I always knew that nothing lasts forever, which is why I invested the money that I was making from the films while I still had it." For the remainder of his life, Steve lived the same way he always had, on his own terms. He invested in stocks, bonds, and real estate, which made him financially secure for life. That allowed him to tend to his first love, ranching and breeding Morgan horses. "I'm a rancher and a cowpuncher at heart," he said. His shoulder injury kept him from lifting weights, but he still exercised. He promoted a form of exercise called power walking and wrote a book with the same name. He also remained an enthusiastic advocate of drug-free, healthy living.
Eat right, exercise well, and don't take any kind of enhancing drugs.
He largely avoided the Hollywood scene, preferring a quiet life among friends and his animals. His wife sadly passed away from a stroke in 1989. Despite maintaining good health for most of his later years, Steve eventually developed lymphoma, and although he planned to live to 100, he passed away on May 1st, 2000, at age 74, and wasn't survived by any children. Steve Reeves was as much of a hero in real life as he was on screen. Both a champion and a pioneer, he was the first to bridge the worlds of bodybuilding and Hollywood, showing the world that the human body can be both powerful and artfully beautiful. With a physique that seemed carved out of marble, he became the living embodiment of classical perfection, all while promoting the one thing that had been long lost in the sport: bodybuilding as a health-oriented endeavor. With nothing but great genetics, restlessness, and hard work, he took the timeless dreams of statues and legends and brought them to life, opening the doors for generations of athletes, actors, and dreamers to believe in something greater, that a human being could rise, perfect themselves, and stand proudly as a true work of art.
Stick with it. You only fail if you stop.